Lovely good morning to you all. Hello from Copenhagen. My name is Brian. I'm a partner here at Colant, and I'm super excited to talk to you today about marketing, ROI, and efficiency. One of my favorite topics. So super excited. Let's just get going. So marketing, ROI, and efficiency is, you could say, a very big topic. You can attack it from many angles: the data side, the tracking side, the optimization, the more strategic side. And I think in this webinar, we're going to do a bit of a new take on it. We're not going to talk that much about how to do tracking or how to optimize your ads for that last, 0.1% of extra performance. We're going to take a bit of a different, maybe more controversial even, stab at this topic. So I hope you're ready for that and willing to go with me on the next 20 minutes or so to talk about that. And please drop comments and questions in the chat. I will get to them at the end. So please do that. So what I'm going to talk about today is first do a little bit of a myth busting, so to say, where we talk about some of the things where people get the concept of marketing ROI wrong and can be led down some troublesome paths. We'll also talk about what a lot of B2B marketing teams are facing today, which I kind of call the brutal reality. And then we'll do very practical, some steps on how to get it right, along with some real life cases, and then a bit of Q&A. So in terms of myth busting, this for me is the number one thing. And I'm sure you've heard someone in your team, maybe even in the very senior leadership team, come to you or your colleagues and say, hang on, my friend, I need to know the ROI of everything we do, every single activity. What is this ROI versus that ROI, that activity and this activity, so I can compare them. This, of course, sounds smart, right? Like we should be able to do that. That would be great in a perfect world. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world here. And the way marketing works, in particular in large organizations, is that you're running thousands and thousands of things at the same time across markets and channels, and you're a big brand and so on. So chasing ROI on the micro level, really digging into every single campaign, does this provide ROI? I think it's mostly a trap, right? It makes you sound smart because you're demanding data and so on, but mostly you're demanding data on something that doesn't exist, right? We don't have good ROI on every single activity. I experienced this myself in my previous job, where a very adamant business leader kept asking us for this, with the result that we just kept spinning our wheels and prioritizing stuff that had a low funnel ROI impact, but didn't really move the business any further. So I think that's the first thing to be aware of. Don't get caught in this trap of trying to chase ROI on a micro level. Sounds smart, actually isn't very smart. Another thing you'll typically hear kind of on an executive level is this story of hang on, marketing. It's just a cost center, right? Which is technically correct. I once presented at a conference with a bunch of leaders, CEOs and CMOs and so on in the room. And of course, at the end of the presentation, one of the CEOs put his hands up and said, but hang on, isn't marketing just a cost center? And next to him, the CMO of the same company was kind of trying to hide a little bit. But of course, he was technically correct. Marketing is a cost center. But looking at it in that way is the completely wrong way. Actually, a more right way to look at it is the marketing has an enormous variance of outcomes. You put money in, you put effort in, and you do it because marketing can make a difference, right? Most companies, most executives believe that marketing actually can make a difference. But the difficult thing is that it has such big variance of outcomes. So that means that marketing can either do absolutely no measurable impact, and it can have tremendous impact, which is why, of course, it's interesting. It's why we're here. It's why it's interesting to do something about. But just treating it as a cost center, it will get you nowhere. You should treat it as a revenue driver, but accept that it's not a one-to-one piece of math where you put money in and you get money out. Instead, it's a probabilistic exercise where you have a large variance of outcomes. Let's do the next one. Final myth for you. It's all about marginal gains. We just get 1% better every day. This line of thinking I at least got from a guy called Dave Brailsford, who was head of the British cycling team that some of you remember, called Team Sky. Used to win all the tours back in the 2010s. His concept was, if you get 1% better every day, then by the end of the year, you'll be exponentially better than you are today. And a lot of marketeers and indeed business leaders have taken that mindset and said, haha, the way to actually get better in things like marketing is to test. Do small incremental things through A/B testing and multivariate testing to keep getting better and better and better. Sounds very alluring, and I would say I used to believe this myself until I managed a large e-commerce shop myself and figured out, hang on, I actually cannot A/B test my way to great marketing ROI, because there is a brutal truth in marketing and say, okay, I cannot just make everything 1% better and then it will all add up. It does not add up. When I managed a large e-commerce site, we thought we could change the color a little bit and then change the navigation a little bit, and all of them had isolated 5 to 10% increase in conversion rate, but never truly were additive. What really mattered for that e-commerce was, did we have a strong brand? Were we well positioned in the market? Did we price correctly compared to retailers and competitors and so on? The small gains are just that. They are infinitely small, especially in a large enterprise. So don't get too caught up in this mindset that you can just micro A/B test your way to success. Okay, enough with the myths. Let's get on to the core of the problem. As I said, what's actually happening out there in a lot of B2B enterprises today. So marketing has really been on a very simple and true trajectory, right? So what's been happening in the last 15 years? We've gone through a period of digitalization. So marketing used to be a very physical exercise. Now it's mostly a digital exercise. When things get digital, they tend to float to global platforms. There's only one website, there's only one LinkedIn, there's only one Google, etc., which means that a lot of B2B enterprises have centralized, scaled their marketing teams and so on, which of course made a lot of sense. To do well in digital, you need to think global and you need to do centralized and scaled operations. Makes sense. But I think it also led to something that I've heard once at a conference, is this joke. I'm not even sure what the punchline is to this joke, but how many marketeers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Of course, the idea being that suddenly marketing have built these quite large specialist teams of marketing automation managers, social media specialists, content creative, etc., in a lot of organizations. And they've really increased their output and specialization, but haven't always increased their actual impact and ROI. And I think that was interesting for some years. And now I think everyone can feel that we're in a new world. We are in a place where there's a real push for not just specialization and scale, but for efficiency. Part of this is an economic reality, right? We all live in a Trump and Powell world of no longer having zero interest rates. We've installed all this MarTech and SaaS software, and we're kind of fatigued and overloaded that a lot of it did not really deliver on the promise. Most of the people who have invested a lot in enterprise CRMs and marketing automation fail to really get value out of their investment. And then we have AI and automation that in many ways is finally delivering on the efficiency promise of automation. Right now, most marketing teams actually can do more for less in areas like translation or versioning or personalization. So that's led to a push for efficiency. And unfortunately, what happens when people say efficiency is in a lot of places is you have what I would call CFO efficiency. So somebody goes through and makes cuts whether that's now we need to reduce costs on IT, now we need to use less agencies, now we're no longer hiring, and now we're downscaling teams. I think this is what a lot of enterprise marketing teams are facing right now, maybe for good reasons, but unfortunately, in a lot of places, it's happening in the wrong way, right? Somebody is coming along, the Grim Reaper, and making blanket cuts. Let's reduce everything by 10%. We're still doing all the things, we're just doing them 10% less. And I think that's fundamentally the wrong way to go about it. Maybe you get slightly lower costs, but you actually don't get better ROI or efficiency. So our advice for a different approach is actually to challenge the prevailing wisdom a little bit, which has been to kind of maximize. Let's get more tech capabilities, more software platforms. We need an ABM platform. We need lead scoring through AI. We need more channels, more campaigns. Why don't we do something about this product or that product? Or even sometimes suffering from a bit of imitation sickness. We need to be more like B2B SaaS, which is difficult because a lot of B2B SaaS companies have very large marketing budgets compared to their revenue, compared to a lot of enterprises. So they're not always meaningful to replicate. So we think it's good to challenge the prevailing wisdom a little bit and say, okay, no, we're not just doing more, because I think this leads to what a lot of marketeers are living in, which is what we call the pebble marketing problem, which is when you have a certain amount of budget or time and you're splitting that budget and time into the tiniest little pieces. So imagine you're at the beach and you're throwing these tiny pebbles into the market, the ocean, and it's giving these tiny little bumps in the water. There's no big splashes. There's no, cascading rings of effect. And I think that's what a lot of marketing teams get caught in, right? Just throwing more and more smaller stones into the water. Looks great. We're doing a bunch of stuff, but we're not actually getting more effect out of it. So it feels great, but the problem is that everything becomes subscale, even for very large companies. Suddenly you're doing $2,000 campaigns or $10,000 campaigns, and you're just never really getting scale in what you do. You have massive transaction costs because whenever you do something in a large enterprise, it goes through a lot of approvals and planning and process. So you incur a lot of costs on alignment and translation, and you get the wrong relationship between development and activation. So what does that mean? It means most B2B companies today get caught in spending more on making stuff than actually bringing stuff to market. And that's a really, really dangerous approach because that's just not how marketing should work to get to scaled. So we think there is a need for a different approach. But of course, that's easy to say, right? Do less stuff, do fewer, bigger, and better things. I think that's a mantra most of us can understand. I guess the question is how. So here's how we would go about it. The first step, which can be a little bit of a brutal step, but a necessary step, is to start by eliminating your waste. And I think it's okay to say to ourselves as marketeers that, hey, we are wasteful, right? That's what we do in marketing. We do a lot of things. Some of them are bound to not be as good as some of the other stuff, right? That's fine. But we have to continually also take out our own waste because this tends to be the shortcut to improving marketing ROI. Typically, finding the least effective 20-30% of marketing, eliminating it and moving that to something better is much, much easier than trying to, for example, lift performance on everything by 30%. That's incredibly hard. But finding the stuff that doesn't work, wrapping it up and investing it into something bigger that works, that's actually quite doable. So the way we practically go about this is by doing something that everyone who, at least everyone who lives in Denmark, loves to do. It's a bit of a national sport. It's sorting our waste, right? Because we don't think everything is waste in the same way when we do marketing. There's different kinds, and I think we're gonna explore the three main buckets of wasteful marketing today, how to spot them, and a few cases. So let's sort our waste together. I hope you're ready to do that with me. The first thing to look out for when eliminating waste is what we call ineffective marketing. So what does that mean? Being ineffective means that you're actually doing things well, but they're not the right things, right? So for example, you're not matching your activities in marketing to how buyers buy. So let's take the typical example is that you're actually in let's say an enterprise software market where there's very few buyers and they have very long buying cycles, but you borrowed your tactics from the e-commerce world. So you're doing SEO and conversion optimization on very few people. So you have a fundamental mismatch. So even though you're really great at SEO or doing that well, it actually just doesn't really matter for what you're trying to do. There's also just an element of time wasting. So a lot of companies have spent a lot of energy and time on organic social media, so posting on LinkedIn profiles or Facebook or whatever, spending a lot of effort and agency time and so on with very little outcomes. So again, maybe they're doing it really well, they're making great content, it's just not effective in the market. Or the classic, I think, which is campaign overdosing, right? That we're doing more campaigns all the time, launching new ones every second or third month. So we might be making really good campaigns, but the market, the sellers, the channels, they just can't absorb them. So even though we're doing it well, it's ineffective because it never really reaches the market. So a case study of this, most of these case studies are anonymous, not to protect the innocent, you could say, except for the first one where I'm not protecting myself. So this is an example of my former work where I was responsible for marketing and digital and lead generation and so on. So I was very passionate about lead generation, obviously I still am, and this was kind of the hammer I was trying to solve every problem with. And for a long time, it worked in many countries and never worked in Germany. And I kept kind of pushing the agenda and coming back to Germany and saying, guys, look at all these great leads we're doing. It's fantastic and so on, because I was thinking from the end user and end customer into the market. But the sellers fundamentally were just going to market in a different way. They were oriented around the channel and they were focusing on the channel because that's how they went to market. And of course, for many years, you could say I thought that I was right and they were wrong. But in the end, of course, I was wrong. I wasn't matching my tactics to the way the company went to market in this particular territory. So maybe I was doing great lead generation. I hope I was. But at the end of the day, it was the wrong activity because it didn't match the go-to-market. And I think a lot of companies get caught in this, right? We're doing right things, we're doing cool things, but we're not doing them in an effective manner. So that's the first thing I would look for, that piece of ineffective marketing where you're doing things well, but they're not the right things in the first place. So you might as well eliminate them. Do less. Let's explore the second bucket. The close cousin of being ineffective is being inefficient. So here we're actually talking about doing the right things, but doing them poorly, right? That our execution is not strong enough or the unit economics are not in our favor. So what could this be an example? It could be, for example, that we need to do lead generation, but we're not getting enough value out of the leads we bring in, or we're paying too much for them, or we don't have clear guardrails on it, right? We get leads in, but they go nowhere. They don't get picked up by sellers and so on. So again, we're doing the right things, but the execution is poor. Sometimes it's also, we need to build a strong brand, but we approached it by making a large brand film. Okay, did we actually have money enough to activate it out in the market? If not, that's just being inefficient. It's the right thing to build a strong brand, but the execution of how we do it, that's actually the important thing. So here's a classic lead generation example, right? From a few years back from a customer we helped scale lead generation. So we did the analysis, classic analysis of how many leads do we get in and how did they proceed down the funnel, and there's some sort of pipeline being built, and that's great. But of course, it's not good enough. The unit economics here are not good enough, but it's the right thing to do. So what's actually happening here? And this is a great exercise to do if you're working with lead generation, of saying, okay, yes, I need to establish my funnel, but then I also need to go deep on what's actually happening. And in this particular case, the real difference maker was not marketing kind of optimizing ads a little bit. It was actually what sellers got the leads that provided the biggest variance of outcomes. So the only reason why we were able to make the whole aspect of lead generation more efficient was by going way down into the weeds and identifying that the way waste happened here was actually in lead distribution. It wasn't so much on our ability to generate leads and so on. It was how we handled them afterwards, which I think is a very classic example out there. So again, this is an example of they were actually doing the right things, but the execution through the funnel is just not poor enough. And we need to eliminate certain markets, certain processes to make this a non-wasteful activity. The third bucket we're going to look at is in many ways the stinkiest of the buckets. It's the smelliest one, and it is the actual wasted marketing. So this is stuff that in theory could be right, but the way we've executed is that they just deliver zero or very low value. And unfortunately, the most common example of waste here is in the world of digital media. So media used to be very analog and in many ways simple and not terribly, actually quite hard to fraud or waste. But in the world of digital media, it's easier than ever to waste all your money. Typically either because of straight up fraud, right? You buy into the wrong display networks and they waste all your money. Or what's more common, things like poor targeting in B2B, which means you suddenly reach hundreds of thousands of people instead of the few thousand people that maybe buy your enterprise software, as an example. So I think every year we review a lot of marketing and media budgets, and I think we find the same thing again and again. There is always a fairly large portion of media that is completely wasted, that is just ready to be cut, reprioritized into something else. So that's definitely one area. Then there's on technology and tools. We've all upgraded our tech stack in the last 10 years with CRMs and marketing automation tools and lead capture tools and yada yada. And of course, those tools are going up in price over time. And we rarely take the time to pause, evaluate, reflect on the tools we have to see, can we do it without technology? Are we actually using the technology to its fullest extent? Or can we get it cheaper, basically? And that leads to typically a lot of wasted time and money as well. And finally, there's waste in the way we work, right? If I produce a lot of assets that never gets used, that's a waste. That's wasted marketing, right? I probably need to reuse existing assets more, or I need to ensure that the stuff I make actually gets activated in the markets at the end. For large enterprises, there's typically also a lot of value in looking into global versus local overlaps and questioning, of course, do I have the right team to do the job I'm set out to do, especially in the age of AI. So a few media examples here. Again, without mentioning the brand in question here. Classic example is I bought a bunch of display advertising, $60,000 worth. The media report I got back looks great. I have a lot of clicks and a lot of leads, but when we look into analytics or our CRM, there's nothing. So something here is wrong. And in this case, it wasn't our tracking. It was simply the media partner looking at the wrong metrics and frankly dumping very, very cheap bot-driven display traffic. So this happens all the time, every single day in many markets. So it's always worth challenging your media agency, your media buyers, whoever they are, are we really in control of fraud, waste, etc.? It's a big problem. Same thing from another global company, to remain anonymous here, but an example of something, a different type of waste. You have a Google account here that looks incredibly professional. A lot of campaigns, a lot of keywords, a lot of ads, great naming convention, an agency that's global and very famous, and a very large consumer brand. So everything looks very professional at the surface level, but when you dig into it, you can see, okay, actually, are we actually buying relevant stuff here? Have we just overcomplicated something that should be very simple? And we had the hypothesis that it probably doesn't really impact us. So when we turned it off, sales stayed the same, leads stayed the same, traffic stayed the same. So the whole exercise of Google advertising was probably just taking credit for all the stuff that already happened. Definitely also an example of waste, instantly money and time freed up to do other great stuff. So I think about the 3 different kinds of buckets. They are a useful way to view your spend, not from a very high level, but to get into the details of, first, are we doing the right things? Second, are we doing them right? And third, are there real areas of true waste we can deliver? I know it's not necessarily a popular exercise to go through, but it's extremely liberating once you get it right, because you free up a lot of time, energy, and resources. So you could say last step in this journey is what to do once our house is in order and clean. We've hopefully identified some short-term and long-term budget and time. This is great because of, again, the Grim Reaper might be coming, so we need to either protect against those savings or reallocate to better stuff. When we've done the exercise of cleaning our house, we've also typically found the good stuff. One of the examples I showed earlier with the wasted display advertising, when we did that exercise, we also found campaigns that were actually very, very strong, but which were stopped because they started doing other things. So it's also a way to find those hidden gems that maybe shouldn't have been a campaign, but should have actually been an always-on exercise. And then you really establish what are kind of the guardrails for good ROI and the unit economics that, should always be in place. How much can we pay for a lead and have it still be a good business, for example? How much can we pay for a customer and still believe this is the right thing to do? That's part of this exercise as well. And that allows us to go on a new path, right? Where we set a clearer purpose for marketing. It's not a cost center, it's a value driver that can do things sales cannot. We build a defensible investment logic. We make a case for marketing as a whole. What is the ROI of marketing as a whole? Not on a micro level, but by investing in marketing, we get this outcome on a broad scale. We have the opportunity now with AI to really challenge and rethink some of our processes. Most obvious one being things like content creation and translation and personalization and so on, where I think there's a bit of freedom now to challenge the current way of working and saying, now we're in an age of AI, how might this process look if we rethought it in our age? And then finally, an impact reprioritization exercise. So generally speaking, marketing spends on people, activation, so bringing something in front of people, technology, all the stuff that supports it, and agencies, people to help us do what we're doing. And if you ask Gartner, most B2B marketing teams spend more or less a quarter on each. I don't know if that's true, but it doesn't matter. You need to figure out what's your right level of prioritization between these areas. In my personal experience, I think most need to put more emphasis on activation and less on most of the other categories. But again, depends on your current setup. So we're almost at the wrap up here, and I just wanted to recap with 3 mental images I hope you bring with you from today's session. Number 1, the pebbles, the small rocks we're throwing into the ocean. In my experience, it's not, ads or tracking or whatever that hurts marketing ROI the most. It's marketing doing too many things for too many audiences at too low scale. So the counterintuitive thing here is that we actually need to remove things to add impact. And I think it's a big thing, especially now that hopefully you're in 2026 planning mode. How can we subtract to add impact? Second image I want you to walk out of this webinar with is sorting our trash. Not at home underneath your sink, but in marketing. Accept that as marketeers, we are wasteful. That's okay. It's a feature. We're trying new things, but we need to continuously take out the trash to free up money, time, and resources to reprioritize into better things. And trust me, it's better that we do it than the CFO comes and takes 10% of everything. And then finally, this image of a new path ahead. And when we have a clean house, when we understand our priorities, we're doing less things, that's also a great time to think about, okay, so what is actually where marketing can be a true value driver? Where can marketing really make a difference? And where can I make an ROI case on marketing as a whole, on the macro level and not on the micro level for every single Google campaign? Because I think that's really where marketing can make a difference. So again, I hope you'll take those 3 mental images with you from today: the pebbles, the trash, and the path ahead. If you have other questions, anything you'd like to talk about marketing ROI and efficiency, also on more nerdy topics like attribution and reporting and dashboards or whatever, you're free to drop a message on LinkedIn or write an email, all that good stuff. And thank you for spending time with me today on a nerdy topic. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a fantastic day.